Thank you. My name is John Sheshik. I'm the Chief of Police here in Boxborough, and certainly thank all of you for coming. You know, I came to town about 3 years ago. We really wanted to make a commitment to really grow and learn with the community. We've certainly done that for the last couple of years, but tonight's special. Tonight is truly special, commemorating a day that we should not forget, in International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So I want to thank this community, an engaged community, a caring community, for coming out here tonight. I certainly want to thank the officers who supported this program and are here today to learn and grow with all of you. Certainly the town officials who support programs like this, and absolutely we want to thank the Lappin Foundation. Debbie Colton, thank you so much for helping us organize this and put this on. And certainly, last but not least, Mr. Salinger, so grateful that you came out here and spent your evening with us and speaking with us. So thank you so much. We're really, really grateful and honored that you've come here today. So I want to introduce Debbie Colton from the Lappin Foundation. And again, thank all of you for coming out here tonight.
Thank you. Is this on? Is it on? Hi, everyone. When I got the call from the chief, after maybe an email first, I was so excited. We're in Beverly. You ever been to Beverly? So this was wonderful that a community cares this much about commemorating this day with communities around the world. So on behalf of Lappin Foundation, Chief, thank you so very much to you and to your department for organizing this event. In November 2005, the United Nations General Assembly designated January 27th as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was the anniversary of the liberation of the death camps Auschwitz-Birkenau. It's a time to remember the more than 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust, including 1.5 million Jewish children, and the millions of other victims of Nazi persecution. With the alarming rise of anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred here and around the world, and with Holocaust denial, distortion, and lack of knowledge amongst younger generations on the rise, it's more important than ever to understand the critical lessons of the Holocaust. It takes courage and strength for survivors to give their testimony of their lived experiences during the Holocaust. And here we all stand with Werner Salinger today at the threshold of time, where the responsibility to bear witness is passed from him to us. Thank you, Werner, for being here with us and for sharing your testimony. It's an honor to be here with you this evening. Werner Salinger was born in Berlin, Germany in April 1932, just 9 months before Adolf Hitler came to power. He personally experienced Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, early November, when Nazi leaders unleashed a wave of pogroms against the German Jewish population and against Jews in Nazi-occupied territories. The name Kristallnacht refers to the shattered glass of Jewish-owned businesses and synagogues that resulted from Nazi-initiated violence and vandalism that was state-sanctioned. So Werner, let's begin with your early life. What do you remember about being young and growing up Jewish in Berlin?
Thanks, Debbie, for the introduction, and thank you, Chief, as well. Thank all your officers for taking such good care of us tonight. I'm wearing a brace, so that's why I'm not standing up. I busted my back about 4 months ago, and it's in the process of healing. But I wear this 24/7, so excuse the appearance and my inability to spend a lot of time standing. So Debbie mentioned why the 27th. It commemorates the liberation of Auschwitz, one of the major, if not the major, death camps during the Nazi times. It was 27th of January. Anybody want to guess at the year?
45.
Yeah.
45.
45, yes, sir. That's the answer. And that's when the Soviet Army, or the Red Army, as it was called in those days, actually liberated Auschwitz. It was not the only death camp, not the only camp that used gas chambers. Somewhere I had a list of the other 6 places, but there were many other concentration camps in Germany that also used gas chambers. In Auschwitz, pretty close to 1 million Jews were murdered during the period roughly 42 to 45. And then the Russians were the first to get there, and that's where the liberation of Auschwitz came on the 27th of January, as the gentleman said, 1945. A long time ago, 1945, I was 13 years old, and I was learning to be an American because I got here in 1939, but I'll get to that in the story. So, as David said, I was born in Berlin, and we had an apartment right in the center of the city. It was a bustling city at the time, even under Nazi times. And both my parents were professional people. And you ask, how did I first learn or feel the Holocaust? I'd go back to September 1935 when let me backtrack just a little bit. As Debbie said, I was born on April 5th, and 9 months later, Adolf Hitler came to power. And he was appointed by the then president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg. He was not elected, he was appointed in 1933, and he became the chancellor. And a year later, in 1934, the president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, died, and Adolf Hitler became the sole political leader of the new Nazi government. He had been in jail in Munich in the earlier 1920s, early 1930s, and while in jail he had written his famous book, and you probably all know the title, which is Mein Kampf. And he made no secret in that book about hating Jews and wanting to establish a pure German race. That's really what the Nazi Party and Nazism was all about. And what happened soon after Hitler took over the government is that the Nuremberg laws were written. He selected a committee of very high-ranking Nazi officers, senior officers, and he charged them with the responsibility of actually codifying and writing laws that would declare anyone that had you could pretty much say had almost a drop of Jewish blood in them could no longer be a German citizen. So how did that affect me, Debbie? Overnight, from one night to the next, I could no longer attend the school I was going to. I could only go to school from that point on with with non-German, in other words, with Jewish children. I was pretty shocked I was 3 at the time, and it was pretty shock to me, but it was in 1935, which was actually 3 years before the Holocaust. And before writing the laws, Hitler sent that committee of about a dozen high-ranking Nazi people to countries that already had racial laws. And which was the first country that committee went to?
U.S. America.
America, the United States of America, because we already had our own racial laws. We had we had segregation, we had Jim Crow, we had something called the Asian Exclusionary Act, which was passed in 1882, and they came to America to study our laws so that they could write better laws when they got back to Germany, which they did. They wrote the Reich Citizenship Law, which declared who could and who could not be a citizen of Germany, and the law to protect German blood and honor. And overnight, both my parents were professional people. My mother was one of the world's first orthodontists, called pediatric dentists in those days, and my father was a lawyer, and overnight, they could no longer service or treat the patients, in my mother's case or the clients in my father's case, overnight. And they were no longer allowed to have any partners working with them who were not Jewish. Overnight. Imagine that. You live in Boxborough or Acton or wherever you might live, and one day you're a citizen of the United States, and the next day you're not. That's what it was. And that was way before Kristallnacht. And I personally, I date the beginning of the Holocaust to the publication of those Nazi laws, which were published on the 20th of September 1935, which is 3 years before Kristallnacht. So that's how it affected me.
Yeah. So Werner, tell us about your memories of Kristallnacht.
Well, let's come to Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was the night of the 8th to the 9th of November, 1938. And we lived right in the middle of Berlin. We lived on Ulandstraße, if any of you know Berlin. It's right off of Kurfürstendamm or Kudamm, which is one of the main boulevards in the center of Berlin. It was a upper middle class mixed section with a lot of fairly high class stores and a lot of people living there in apartments. Ours was a very large apartment because we had my mother's dental practice in the same apartment as where we lived. So it was pretty large. Yeah. And it was on the corner of Ulandstraße and Kudamm, which is pretty high class, well, upper middle class, let's say, part of Berlin today, and it was then. And Kristallnacht, the day before in Paris, this is the cause of Kristallnacht, really. The day before in Paris, a young Jewish man in Paris, I think he was in his early 20s, walked into the German embassy in Paris and shot the first person he met, killed a staff member of the German embassy in Paris. And that incensed the Nazi government, especially Mr. Goebbels, and he ordered, the next day, he ordered Kristallnacht, or in German it's called Kristallnacht. From my perch on the Ulandstraße, I could look across the street. There was a row, kind of like a mall, a strip mall, of fairly upper class stores, most of them, maybe all of them, owned by Jewish owners. And they, like Jewish-owned stores all over the country, had their plate glass windows smashed, and I could see the glass I could hear the glass, I could see the glass on the streets, I could see bodies on the streets, and there was a synagogue just a block away, and I still smell that dark, acrid smoke. I can still smell it today. From the burning synagogue just a block away, which was the synagogue to which my parents belonged, although they were not very highly observant Jewish people. They were sectarian Jews, but they were incredibly proud of their Jewish history and their Jewishness. And of course, they had their own practices set up. My father had a new partner who was a Jewish partner, and his last name was Berlag, B-E-R-L-A-G, and he was married to the daughter of Leo Beck, and Leo Beck was the chief rabbi of Berlin at the time. Wow. So my father's partner was married to Leo Beck's daughter, and they had moved to London before, it was before Kristallnacht. And the rabbi, Leo Beck, the chief rabbi of Berlin, did not stay with his family and ended up in the Theresienstadt camp for several years, but survived the war. I had two grandparents who also ended up in Theresienstadt after Dachau. They were in Dachau and then in Theresienstadt, but they also survived the war. I don't know why. What was my family's direct contact? Well, one day, my father and his new law partner had a practice pretty much in the middle of Berlin, very bustling city. And one day, the building fortunately had a front stair and a back stair. And also, fortunately, the building had a very courageous woman who was the manager of the building or superintendent of the building. And one day, it was soon after Kristallnacht, three Gestapo men came into that building asking for my father. And the building also, it was fortunate in having a front stair and a back stair. And it was also fortunate in having this very courageous woman who ran up the stairs and warned my father that three Gestapo men were downstairs looking for him. And my father was a man who didn't make decisions very quickly, but fortunately he made a big one that day. And he ran down the back stairs and ended up hiding out at his mother's house for almost 2 weeks. He never told me that he was at his mother's house. He told me that he had been on a business trip to Bremen, which is a big seaport in Germany, and to validate that story about the trip that he never took, he went and bought me a bunch of ships, wonderful model ships some of which I still have today.
Wow.
And it really started my interest in the maritime industry and in ships. I've worked on ships, I've sailed on boats and ships, and it all began when my father told me the story of his business trip to Bremen, which never actually happened.
That's beautiful.
So that was Kristallnacht. It's really hard to describe that evening or even the next day. But it happened, and it was well documented at the time. Number of people killed, I think over 100 Jews, mostly men, because they were easily recognizable because of their beards. Most Jewish men wore beards in those days. And the burning synagogues all over the country.
Yeah.
And one was right in just 1 block away from us, called the Fasanenstraße synagogue, Fasanenstraße. And my parents got a visa legally to come to the United States. Very fortunate. But we didn't have an affidavit of support. To come to a foreign country, any German, and we were still considered Germans by the rest of the world, even though Germany didn't consider us Germans anymore. They just thought of us as Jews. But you also needed an affidavit of support. You still do today. And we didn't have one. We did not have an affidavit of support. Without that, we could not have come to this country or any other country. Let me switch to a man named Karl Lemley. Karl Lemley was a German Jewish man who came from Lappin, Germany, which is a fairly mid-sized city in the middle of the country. And he came here in the early 1900s, 03 or 04. And he struggled for about 10 years to make a living in this country. And then suddenly found his way into the American movie industry, and he became quite well-to-do. He was the founder, actually, of Universal Studios. And that studio made the film All Quiet on the Western Front, which was a big hit in the 30s. So Karl Lemley made a lot of money and became quite wealthy. And he decided when the Holocaust ratcheted up with Kristallnacht that the best that he could do was to help any family that had a connection to Lappin, Germany. My mother was one of 5 sisters, and her oldest sister was married to a man from Lappin, Germany. So they very quickly got an affidavit of support from Mr. Lemley. And my parents evidently didn't know anyone else to go to, so they went back to him requesting an affidavit of support. And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't do it again. The State Department has warned me that I've done it too many times, and they've asked me not to do it anymore. I happen to have another uncle who was already in New York, who had been married to one of the 5 sisters who had died of breast cancer in the mid-30s. And he said, oh, I got to go see this guy the next time he comes to New York and convince him to give the 3 Salingers, my mother, my father, and me, one more time an affidavit of support. And he was able to convince Mr. Lemley to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here tonight talking to you. I would have gone up in smoke like the other 6 million. But that happened, and on the 12th of February, 1939, we arrived in New York on the Holland America ship Zaandam. Pretty rough crossing, and we arrived here. And I ended up growing up in Baltimore, Maryland. Unfortunately, my mother had caught tuberculosis on the trip over on the ship, somehow caught TB, and died within the first 10 months of our being in this new country. Never practiced dentistry again. She'd brought her whole practice over here, but never practiced it again. We were only in this country about 3 weeks when, before she was quarantined, before anyone knew that she had tuberculosis, but she did. And in order to practice medicine again or dentistry again, you have to take some courses in your new country. And we were told, or she was told, that the best and cheapest way and fastest way to do that would be in Richmond, Virginia. So only in this country for 3 weeks, we got on a train and went down to Richmond, Virginia. And the next morning when we woke up, we got on a bus to go where she had to go to find out about the courses that were required. And we didn't know anything about Jim Crow, but we sat in the back of the bus in Richmond, Virginia, and the bus driver saw us in the rear mirror, jumped out of his chair, brought the bus to a halt. I think he brought the bus to a halt first, and then he turned around and yelled at us in a language we could hardly understand. Didn't we know that the back of the bus was for niggers? That was my introduction to race in the United States of America. And he said if we didn't move there, he'd call the police and get us yanked out. So that was an early introduction to, it was hard for us to believe we had just left a country that was so prejudicial and so punishing to a segment of its population, thinking we were coming to a country of the free and the brave. And we were introduced to racism in Richmond, Virginia. Well, my mother died within 7 or 8 months, one day, I think, after my 7th birthday. And I was sent away to live with relatives in Princeton, New Jersey. And I lived there for 4 years with a family that included my father's first cousin, Elizabeth, who was married to a world-renowned New Testament theologian. Had three kids of her own, and took in 5 of us refugee kids. And that was in Princeton, New Jersey, 4 of the best years of my life.
Will you tell them about Uncle Albert?
Well, Albert Einstein lived down the street, about 12 houses away, and he had a woman, companion, administrator, I don't know what she was to him, but her name was Frau Duca, Mrs. Duca, and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who had come to New York from Cape Town, South Africa, to help raise me. In the meantime, my father had gotten remarried to another German Jewish refugee woman. But anyway, my maternal grandfather knew Frau Duca from the moment she was born, really, because they both came from Freiburg, Germany. And so when my grandmother would come and visit me in Princeton, we would walk down the street to the Einstein house, and if Uncle Albert was there. I got to call him Uncle Albert. He would take my hand, walk me through his garden, which was very beautiful, and then take me back to his studio, take his violin off the wall, and play his violin for me. Very memorable. Of course, I was just a kid, 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, and he loved kids. He was well known for loving kids. So that was an important part of my growing up. And my uncle, I called him my uncle, who was married to Elizabeth. Elizabeth was my father's first cousin, Jewish, of course. And Odo was a world-renowned New Testament theologian. And they received honorary degrees from the Sorbonne in Paris, France, on the very same day in the early 1920s. Then I came back, then when my father remarried a woman, and they lived in Baltimore, and they asked me to come and live with them, so I did for about 8 years. Kind of grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and then then I had a gap year, went to the University of Maryland for a year, and then the Korean War broke out, and I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and returned to Germany, wearing U.S. Air Force blue, and I spent almost 4 years in Germany in becoming an intelligence officer and doing a lot of interrogation, because at that time, it was 1951, 2, 3, that time, we were at the very height of the Cold War, and we were all convinced that we would be going to war with the Soviet Union, not tomorrow or the next day, but any minute this afternoon. That's how close it was, and I spent 4 years there. The International Red Cross had discovered that the Soviets were still holding several thousand German prisoners of war who had been there. They were the survivors of the hundreds of thousands that had been captured by the Russians during the war. And the Red Cross said, you got to send these people home. Well, these people, many of them had pretty good lives. They worked on farms, had gotten together with Russian women, had little families of their own, had children of their own. They didn't really want to go home. But the Red Cross said, you got to go home. And so they did. And they knew a lot about the new Soviet Union that we were going to go to war with any minute. And we didn't know a darn thing about the new Soviet Union at the time. So we interviewed those people and got a lot of information so we could destroy all what had just been rebuilt so that we could destroy it again. These guys knew how long the runways were in the new airfields. They knew how thick the factory walls were in the new factories. They knew what kind of steel was used in the new bridges, all that kind of stuff. And we extracted all that information and sent it back to the Pentagon so the Pentagon could prepare strike folders for the new bombing raids that would destroy the rebuilt Soviet Union again. And I was there for over 4 years. Yeah.
And what was that like for you to be back in Germany? And did you have any family left there?
Well, I did have, my mother was one of 5 sisters, one of whom had, they all went to the University of Freiburg because they lived in Freiburg. And one of the sisters, Lucy, had fallen in love and married a man who became a dentist at Freiburg and who was Catholic. And she had converted to Catholicism to marry him and did marry him. And they had one kid who became my first cousin, Traudel. So yeah, I had that person. And I still have relations over there today because I, at the time, married a woman from Germany, daughter of a German soldier. And she grew up in a very liberal family, but he was drafted into the Nazi army, and he served in the Nazi army because he was drafted into it. And he became my father-in-law for a lot of years, and we became very good friends.
How did your family take that news?
Oh, that was sort of the road less traveled by. Robert Frost road less traveled by. I felt very strongly that I had to come back home to Baltimore to tell my family face to face what was going to happen, which was my marriage at that time. And basically, they were okay with it.
Really?
I mean, it took a little bit of a hard sell, you know, and I was there about a week, maybe 10 days. But it all worked out over the years. It really did.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be glad to take questions from the audience.
Well, how about before we do that?
Okay.
What did you do as an adult?
Oh,
What was
as
your
a-
life like here?
As an adult, well, I spent I did things in increments of 14 years. I spent, when I came back, I had no credentials. I had no college degree yet when I came back from Germany. And I worked in the retail industry in Washington, D.C. for 14 years. Then I became the development director of the Unitarian Service Committee here in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 14 years. Then I became the founding director of the Dana Greeley Foundation for Peace and Justice, and I only did that for 7 years. Because after 7 years, they decided they could get along without me. And so they did. And after the Peace Foundation, I worked very closely with former President Jimmy Carter after his presidency. Did a lot of international development work
Mm-hmm.
with the Unitarian Service Committee. And then I retired when I was 65, I guess. That was almost 30 years ago. Wow. How time flies.
It does.
The best gig I've ever had in my life, Holland America Cruise Lines hired me as a lecturer on board their ships for 14 consecutive years. It was a wonderful gig. I loved every minute of it. Went all over the world for 14 years, including Antarctica 17 times.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
Be glad to answer.
could I, just so that everybody could hear me. So Werner, I was wondering, living this remarkable life, right? And unfortunately, your life was upended when you were a child, 6 years, coming to a new country, not knowing the language, losing your mother, going between homes. Why is this important for you to talk about? Specifically, what is it about Holocaust education do you think is important? I'll start there and then I have another question.
Well, of course it's important. When I lived in Arizona, which I did for 30 years, I was on the board of the Phoenix Holocaust Association. Did a lot of speaking in Arizona, and mostly in schools, but also occasionally on military bases, Luke Air Force Base especially. Spoke there every year for a long. Spoke here in Hanscom as well. But mostly when I was in Arizona, it's incredibly important because, you know, we have Holocaust deniers. We have all kinds of people, and you can see what's going on in our own country. Book burning, imagine book burning.
No.
Book banning and then book burning. Take a look at what's happening in the militarization of our cities. People being shot and killed. When I signed the oath to serve in the Air Force, that wasn't the country I signed up to defend. So it's extremely important. And especially in the Phoenix area where there are a lot of relatively light, I think something like 65 or 70 Holocaust survivors. And Karen Verna down there runs the speaking bureau. And it's incredibly important.
Mm. And Werner, I'll just take it so they can hear me. Anti-Semitism set you on a path in your life you and your family probably never imagined. And here we are again, that anti-Semitism at an all-time high in our country and around the world. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think we can do to change what's happening?
Well, thanks for the question. Yeah, of course, anti-Semitism has always been around. Jews have always been hated because they can't take root anywhere. Even though in Germany, Jews were incredibly well integrated. There was never a Jewish ghetto anywhere, or anywhere where Jews lived separately from their German neighbors until the Nuremberg laws were published in 1935. It's incredibly important to support Israel, to defend Israel. It's also incredibly important to make some movement towards the creation of a state for Palestinians and for other people oppressed. Israel was created by a decree of the United Nations. And overnight, if I tell my story and say overnight, I experienced it, imagine what the Palestinians felt that lived in what formerly was Palestine, and also overnight. They were told that this isn't their country anymore, this isn't their land anymore. So I understand all that. First and foremost, if I were asked to defend the state of Israel, I would in a split second, because I think Jewish people need a state of their own. But in the next second, I would defend Palestinian rights to create their own state.
Werner, what message do you want to leave us with, and what do you want people to take forward?
Well, first of all, I'd be glad to take questions from the audience. But in answer to your question, what I always leave kids with, especially in school grades 10, 11, 12, be upstanders, not bystanders. Whatever your issues are, whatever your teachers teach you, whatever your family teaches you. However, if your family teaches you bad stuff, then have the courage to defend yourself against the bad stuff. And families do, I'm a very liberal guy politically. Have run for office in this country right down the road in Marlborough. I ran for the school committee and served on the school committee for 4 or 5 years, I think, back a long time ago. But yeah, get involved, and you can't just sit by and let this happen. It happened so fast.
Yeah.
It happened so fast in Germany. I mean, I go to Germany now. I still have 2 brother-in-laws in Germany. I go to Germany now, and I drive down those roads and through every little town. In every little town in Germany that you drive through, you will see at least 2 churches, a Protestant church and a Catholic church. And still, that's the country that killed 6 million Jews and wanted really to kill 11 million. There was a conference in January 20th, 1942. Again, about a dozen or so very high-ranking Nazi officers led by Reinhardt, forget his name now, but anyway, and in one day, it's called the Wannsee Conference, 20th of January 1942. In one day, in between sips of cognac and little sandwiches that the guests were fed during that day, in one day, they decided the fate not of 6 million, but of 11 million Jews. They had taken a very careful census of the Jewish population in countries that they had already conquered and in countries that they had still not yet conquered. And that number came to 11 million. And out of that one-day conference came the gas chambers.
Yeah.
And the only reason we didn't get a total number of 11 million Jews killed is because the Allies won the war before the Nazis could do that. And at that conference, one person was asked, what's the downside of all this? And he said, well, there are two major things I'm concerned about. Number one is the logistics of getting 11 million people to the killing sites, because they were also trying to fight a war on the Eastern Front against the Soviets. And the other thing he was concerned about is the psychological effect it could have on the German soldiers ordered to do the killing. Those were the two major concerns while they were sitting around the table, sipping cognac and figuring out how to kill 11 million people.
Thank you, Werner. Thank you. Want to take questions now?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. It's very inspiring and very moving. I appreciate you telling me.
You're welcome, sir.
When you went back to Germany in the 50s, was there any sign of Jewish life at all?
You know, thank you for the question. When I went back to Germany in 1951, on December 1951, was there any sign of Jewish life at all? I didn't find it in Germany, but I found it quite by accident one year, I think the next year, in the country of Georgia, which used to be one of the 15 Soviet republics. And I stumbled on a Yom Kippur service on the streets of Georgia as I was just walking around by myself at night, and it was packed. But in Germany, the synagogue that used to be my parents' synagogue, the Fasanenstraße synagogue, has become the headquarters of the Jewish community, and not just in Germany, I think, but pretty much in Europe. And the synagogue is not a functioning parish synagogue, but it operates as the focal point of Jewish life. But that's today. I don't think that was true in 1951 or 52 or 53. So the answer to your question is, at that time, not. But then Jewish people began to come back, and especially Jewish people, the Soviets loosened up, and Gorbachev came to power, and it was easier to leave. I'm trying to think of the dissident's name. Yashansky?
Sharansky?
Sharansky, yeah.
Natan Sharansky.
Sharansky, yeah. When I was leading the Greeley Foundation one year, we had an exchange program with Russian people and people from this country, and we decided to create a sister state agreement. We had sister city agreements, but no sister state. So we created a sister state from between the state of Vermont and the state or the Republic of Karelia in the Soviet Union, now Russia. And yeah, where am I going with this? So Jewish life began to creep
Come
back
back.
into the former republics of the Soviet Union. And Mr. Sharansky, we were taking the governor of Vermont, who was Madeline Kunin at the time, and her husband and Ben & Jerry's, from Ben & Jerry's. We helped them create some scoop shops in Russia. And yeah, the climate had changed, and Jewish life had become back to Europe and certainly back to Germany.
Other questions?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate
Well,
it.
thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So you bring a very unique perspective, being that you unfortunately had to go through what you did in Germany. How would you compare what's going on here now compared to Germany, and how do we heal this country so we don't end up going through problems like in this country?
How do I feel about this country?
Well,
Is that the question?
Well, basically,
What's happening?
what you went through in Germany, right? Somewhat's going through now here, but how do we fix the country so we don't go through a civil war here?
Yeah, well, I get asked that question a lot, and this is still a democracy. And as far as I know, there are two ways we can change it. We can start another civil war, or fight another civil war if the other side starts it, or we can try to change it through the democratic process of electing the right people. And you know, if you watch the daily news, which I do pretty carefully, what's happening now on the streets of Wisconsin and in Minnesota and other places, it's very, very important. There are fights, there are political fights, election fights going on now in Supreme Courts of many of our 50 states, including Wisconsin, which several years ago became majority Democrat. And they're in the middle of another big fight right now. I had a friend I still have a lot of friends in Rockport and Gloucester because I lived up there for 40 years. And just this week, one of the guys on my Monday morning talk group wrote the group saying, what can we do to help the people in Minnesota? What can we do to help the people in Wisconsin? So we got to be, it's the only way I know is to change it either through violent means or through the democratic process. And you know, you follow it all of you here are, with your interest in coming here tonight, are people who are concerned about this, and you follow the news. And when I see people shot on the streets of Minneapolis, and I see people, libraries banning books, being forced to ban books, it's crazy, it's incredible. It's not the country I once knew. It's not the country I came to in 1939. You're right to raise the question. I think the way to change it is through the midterm elections and things like that. And we have to become involved in it and work on it.
Good.
Make sure the right people get elected, and we'll change it.
Other questions?
Sure.
Thank you very much for being here today and
Sure.
telling us your story. I have a quick question about how was your experience with anti-Semitism after the war?
Anti-Semitism after the war?
Good question.
And how it evolved throughout I guess your entire life.
Well, that's probably a question that you might.
That's a good question. Well,
Yeah.
maybe for you personally, and then I can
Well,
take it. Mm-hmm.
I have 4 kids, and now 6 grandkids, and 7 greats.
Mm.
And it's always on our mind, you know, how can we combat or how can we deal with this rising anti-Semitism again? Jewish people are easy to hate. For
Yeah.
one reason is they're highly successful people. Therefore, there's a lot of jealousy. There was in Germany, certainly, you know, out of the German Jewish population, not at all in line with the numbers. There were probably 350 or 400,000 Jews before the Nazism in Germany, and there were many more professional people like my parents, you know. So there always is a lot of jealousy in the world, and I'm sure that's true in this country as well. You just can't sit back and accept it. If you know people who are saying anti-Semitic things or taking anti-Semitic actions, you just got to be brave and respond to it. You can't say that about my friend who is Jewish. So please don't say that again. Stuff like that. You can't just sit back and accept it, because it happens awfully quick. Like I said, you know, you could drive through any German town and you'll see at least two churches, Catholic, Protestant, and during all that run up to the Kristallnacht night and the ratcheting up of the anti-Jewish movement, the taking out of their homes. You know, we have Stolpersteine now in Germany that are stones, that are plaques that are placed into the concrete or the bricks in front of the home where Jewish families used to live to commemorate their lives, and that kind of thing. We just have to fight it. You can't accept it. It happens so fast.
Yeah.
All those towns that had all those churches and weren't enough to stop Nazi rise to power. I drive through German cities now or towns. I think of that every time. You look at the Catholic Church, you look at the Protestant Church. They were there then, they're there now. You just can't let it happen again. It happens extremely quickly.
Mm-hmm. Could I answer that
Sure.
too? So I'm just thinking back to a real life experience with me that I just finished. And I'm a Holocaust educator. That's one of the things I do. So I believe education is key as well. And there was a time I would never go into a class younger than 8th grade to talk about such an horrific, indescribable, unbelievable incident like the Holocaust. Like, why would I do that to children? And it is so sad that now I am called to elementary schools, that the kids are drawing swastikas and Heil Hitler at an elementary school, and we don't have the language, we don't have the wherewithal to deal with this. And I'm thinking back to a project I just finished, Werner, that I was asked to come in and teach 6-year-olds a soft introduction to the Holocaust. Like they're your age, and it just hit me. And I just struggled, and I asked the director why, and he said because they know, they hear it, right? Wherever they're hearing it from. It was one of the hardest but most rewarding things I've ever done, that I'm able now to find a way in, to find the language, that we can say it even without using that H word. And then it was a 4-week progression, and by the 4th week, someone said to me, "Are you Jewish?" And, he never met a Jew, and this little kid, and he said, "Well, why do people hate Jews?" It was just such innocence. So it's learned, right? This hatred is learned. And we have to be not just reactive. We have to stand up. But what can we do proactively? And that's something I think everybody can ask themselves as an individual and as a town. That what can we do proactively so it doesn't happen in our community with our children? Education, my friend, is key. Other questions?
Yeah.
Thank you as well for being willing to share your story. And as it relates to education, can you tell us a little bit about the first time you shared your story?
Mm-hmm.
Were there challenges to bring yourself to talk about your experiences? And what led you to being willing to talk about such a horrific time?
Oh, thanks for the question.
That's a great question.
The first time I think would have probably been somewhere in Arizona, and I just felt it my duty, really. I got to be appointed to the board of the Phoenix Holocaust Association, and they had a very active speakers bureau, and it's a big area. The Valley of the Sun stretches 100 miles east-west and 100 miles north-south. And there are a lot of educational opportunities there. Every time I get asked to speak at a gathering like this, I'm lucky. I feel glad that I have the opportunity to speak. It took a while to get into it. I've written several books, and the memories come very easily. And I'm actually very grateful to have opportunities like this. I don't exactly remember the first one, but it was somewhere in Arizona. I have a painting in my little apartment where I live now that was done by a 10-year-old girl. And she gave it to me about a week after I had spoken there. And it's a tree of life. It's just a gorgeous painting. And she just contacted me and gave me that. And it's hanging in my apartment now. I had friends of mine, and my two best friends in Germany were Renata and Rudy Shepsis, and they were brother and sister, and they never made it. I never saw them again. Their mother never made it. Their father did. He happened to be a doctor, and he managed to survive the camps and came to this country in the 46 or so, and took the necessary courses and eventually practiced medicine again, and
Wow.
married someone whom he had met in the camps. Never saw his wife again.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank you.
don't
Someone
let
else?
it happen again. So here we are in this beautiful town of Boxborough.
Yeah.
What can we do? We can get involved in the democratic process.
Yeah.
As people are all over this country, and especially in Colorado, to try to get rid of Lauren Boebert. And there are other places in this country where we can participate just by contributing. And we must, to elect the right people.
Yeah. And there's another question, Werner, but I think also what you're doing here this evening, right, making a commemoration an annual part of the town's calendar and the town's life, and what are the schools doing around Holocaust and genocide education? Even though we have a mandate in this state, a child still can get all the way through Massachusetts school because it's not specifically saying they have to learn about the Holocaust, any genocide. So education is really key, and be involved and ask questions. What are we doing as a town? There was another question, Werner. Someone right there.
Sorry, I'm not sure how much you remember because you were very young, but if you could share what you do remember of that pre-Kristallnacht period, or what your father or your mother may have kind of relayed to you, what it was like leading up to that night, how that impacted your family and your relations with like friends or going to school.
Sure. My father, before the Nuremberg laws came out, my father had an office and a partner with a non-Jewish person, and he lived pretty much in the center of Berlin too, still lived at home. He couldn't make up his mind easily on many, many things, except that day the Gestapo came and he made the right choice and he ran down the back stairs quickly. But he used to walk home and with his friend, and he would say, well, I don't think this is going to be so bad because the German flag and the Nazi flag are flying side by side. That was several years before Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was the sealer. You couldn't excuse that, and you couldn't accept that. And we don't want to get to that point where we have a Kristallnacht in this country. We don't want to get to that point where we arrest people. Well, we're maybe already at that point where we arrest people for no reason, people who have not committed any crimes, people have been separated from their families. I read a story about a young boy, 5-year-old boy, came home from school the other day and was grabbed while he was getting out of his own car on his own driveway. led up to the front door of his house, told to knock on the door. Fortunately, no one answered, and they left. But he didn't leave. He's now in Texas at a detention society. It's really scary here in this country now. And yet this is a democracy, and we have a chance to change it.
Thank you for
We have to be careful that the MAGA people are sticking to the rules, and that's not a guarantee by any means.
Thank you, Werner.
Yeah.
And one more question? It's 8 o'clock. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on how those of us in the room here tonight could think about commemorating this day a year from now and bring your lessons to the greater community?
Oh, that's a great question.
That's a great question for an educator. I have great suggestions.
Well, first of all, congratulations to you all for being here tonight.
Yeah.
It's a bitter cold night, and you came out to hear a story that you wanted to hear. I hope you heard some things you are interested in. And a year from now, if I were living in Boxborough, and I can remember when I used to live in Marlborough, I used to organize things. So I would find a group of people who are here tonight, some of whom you may know, some of you whom you may not, and get a dozen people or so and get together several times between now and a year from now and plan an event a year from now. And maybe plan it at the high school that has a larger auditorium.
Yeah. Can I offer a few suggestions? Something your town could work on, other cities and towns are doing. They're adopting the working definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, right? And part of that, too, is a robust Holocaust programming and education. So if you know every year, January 27th every year is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, you put it on your town's calendar. And you have a film, or you have a book read, or you have a survivor, or soon second or third generation. But make it part of what you do as a town. And start it now. And if anybody wants any guidance on how to adopt the definition, I will put you in touch with other cities and towns as well that are doing it.
Thank you both for your suggestions.
Welcome.
I was just made aware of a film that you're screening in March. It's called From the Swastika to the Holocaust.
From the swastika to Jim Crow.
From
swastika to Jim Crow.
Yeah.
We could bring that here.
From the swastika to Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And I hope to be able to see it on the 25th. But you could get a hold of a film like that and build an evening around it for next year's commemoration of the Holocaust.
Many films are free, and I'm available for a resource. That's what Lappin Foundation does. We're a resource center, and it can be incredible. And it's all about educating.
I have another question. What brought you to Massachusetts from Arizona? Bring me to snow on the ground.
Yeah, that's a good one.
What brought me to Massachusetts? A job offer at the Unitarian Service Committee. And I was there for 20 years. Traveled a lot. I was the development director at the UUSC. And it was a job offer. And it was a good move. I loved living here. We lived in Marlborough and then 40 years in Rockport. And then we became snowbirds. Yeah.
Over there, Werner?
I have one question. There's some people say that anti-Semitism is overrated because they don't take into consideration other groups, other minorities like Palestinians or the Quran in Burma. I mean, I personally think that there's something specific about anti-Semitism, not only because it's been going on for a long time, but there was an intentional, concerted effort to remove, a group of people.
Yeah.
So what do we say about things like that?
Could I? All hatred is bad. All hate, anti-Semitism is not worse than any other hatred. All of it's bad. But what's happening about anti-Semitism right now is the fastest growing hate in our country against a group of people. It's not saying anti-Semitism is worse than any other hate. All of it's bad. But when it's denied and it's not dealt with and it's swept under the rug and it's not being part of the conversations of other hate, that's where the problem is. Our state has risen to number 5 in the country for the rate of anti-Semitism. Awful. Report. Well, that's what I wanted to say. That's only what's reported. It's estimated more than 50% of anti-Semitic incidents are not reported. So if someone said to me, what about other hates? All of it's bad. It's not saying anti-Semitism is any worse, but what seems to be needed is education about what is anti-Semitism. I go into schools and I do programs about anti-Semitism with schools, and I say to the principal, I will train you. Would you like to do it? They're petrified to do it. Petrified. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. So it needs to be on the agenda for education and training for all the people who are front-facing with our children, right? And I also want to say this, my friends. Being Jewish is so much more than anti-Semitism. There's so much more to Judaism. If you're commemorating International Holocaust Remembrance Day in January, my goodness, in May, celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month and learn and explore all the incredible contributions Jewish people have made to our country. Right? So much more. We are so much more than a people that is hated. So that's what I would say to someone. It's all bad. Anybody else?
Thank you for all your gracious testimonies and the resources. What do we say to rather militant Holocaust deniers? What are the first few things that you say to people who will not listen?
So I don't know if you heard the question is, what do you say to radical Holocaust deniers who will not listen? There's always going to be people on that end, that 5% or whoever it is, they're probably just not going to listen. But it's about everybody else listening. And it's about everybody else taking action. And everybody else being educated. And drown them out. It's highly unlikely those people on the end there are going to listen. You can force them to sit with a survivor and it's just human nature how it is. But it's about the rest of us. The power of the rest of us. Anyone else? So Werner, thank you so much. It's always such an honor. And right? Thank you so much, really. Thank you.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all. Great to be here.
Nice.